Now, let's get started with our next presentation, and that's going to be a discussion about managing crabgrass. Our speaker is Dr. Esther McGinnis. Esther is an extension horticulturist, and she's the director of the NDSU Master Gardener Program. She coordinates research on native plant evaluation, pollinator conservation, and plants for rain gardens. As the administrator of the Master Gardener Program, her initiatives include planting pollinator habitats, fighting food insecurity, beautifying communities, and diagnosing plant disorders. Esther, welcome to the expo.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, everybody, for turning out today on this cloudy day. It's a perfect day for sitting and listening to some presentations on gardening as we dream about May. We're going to be talking about crabgrass management in North Dakota lawns, and I need to make sure that I give credit where credit is due. You'll notice that there's another name on this presentation, and that's my former graduate student, Yolanda Schmidt. We worked together on preparing various crabgrass management bulletins and this PowerPoint as part of her master's project. So if you're interested, we do have an extension publication out there that will give you more information. Today, we're going to define the problem of crabgrass in your home lawn and why it's so irritating. We're going to help you identify crabgrass and differentiate it from other weedy grasses such as quackgrass and barnyard grass. And then we'll talk about management. So in order to manage the situation, the first thing is to grow a healthy, dense lawn where crabgrass is less likely to germinate. But also we'll talk about herbicide management, both pre-emergence and post-emergence herbicides that can be useful. So let's define the problem. So crabgrass is our most common annual weedy grass that we have, and it's really problematic because it produces so many seeds, and those seeds build up in the soil and continue to germinate. So they'll start germinating as soil temperatures warm up, and they'll continue germinating throughout most of the summer. Unfortunately, we do have limited control options, and at a certain point in the season, we actually just do give up. We have two species of crabgrass in our lawns. We've got both smooth crabgrass and large crabgrass. So why is this such a problem? So the reason is that it really sticks out like a sore thumb in our lawns. So in comparison to our Kentucky bluegrass and our fine fescues, crabgrass is a much wider leaf blade. It's also a little bit different color. It's more yellowish than the dark green of our lawns. So it really stands out. It grows very fast and vigorously, and it can crowd out our desirable turf grasses. With it being an annual, when it dies out, it'll also leave bare patches in the lawn where other weed seeds can germinate. Crabgrass has a lot of competitive advantages. It starts to germinate and will germinate over a wide variety of temperatures. So it starts to germinate when the top 2 to 4 inches of soil reaches 55 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's coming up fairly soon here. It will continue to germinate throughout the summer, but the majority of the seed will germinate when the soil temperatures are between 60 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit. And then as for the established plants, it thrives during midsummer. It likes the heat and the drought and does really well when our Kentucky bluegrass is really languishing. So unfortunately, crabgrass really has some advantages over our turf grasses. We want to know how to identify crabgrass because we want to make sure that that's the problem. If it's not crabgrass, say for example, it's something like quackgrass, we would have a different management protocol for that. But let's first talk about identifying crabgrass in the seedling stage. This is how it looks like when it germinates. It has a lighter green color, And then that first leaf is going to be twice as long as it is wide. It looks a little bit like a corn seedling. But most of you won't notice it until it's established. So this is what it looks like when it's more established. This is why it's called crabgrass. And that's because the tillers will lie flat on the ground, making it look like a crab. So we say it has a prostrate appearance. Now we just wish that crabgrass would crab walk its way out of our lawns, but it won't. Other ways to identify this is we would look at the seed head. It has a finger-like seed head with anywhere between 2 and 5 spikes coming off of it. And large crabgrass would have a larger seed head versus smooth crabgrass. Showing you the difference here between smooth and large crabgrass. Smooth crabgrass is on the left, and hopefully you can see this figure on the right. As it's silhouetted against this guy's finger, you can see there are hairs on it. So smooth crabgrass has few to no hairs. Large crabgrass has a lot of hairs on the leaf blade and culm.
Is there one that's more dominant?
Is there one that's more dominant? I would say both. I would say we've got both. So you've probably got a lot of smooth, larger crabgrass. I do see a fair amount of that in Fargo, but I don't know which one is necessarily more numerous than others across the state. We haven't done a study on that. So why do we need to identify the weed? Well, we need to make sure we've got the proper weed, because then we'll tailor the management strategy for it. So if you've got crabgrass or barnyard grass, they've got similar management strategies. But if you've got quackgrass has a different life cycle, and we've got fewer control options for it. In fact, quackgrass cannot be controlled by the herbicides that control crabgrass and barnyard grass. So the first thing is you need to make sure what weed you have. In order for that, you've got to learn the identification terms for grass. So when it comes to identifying grass, we need to know these terms: ligule, auricles, blade, collar, and sheath. So the actual leaf blade is above the collar region and would extend upward. The sheath is below the collar, and the collar is where the blade and sheath come together. We want to look on the back of the collar region. So think of like the back of my jacket. That's where the ligule would be. The auricles would be on the front of my collar. There are different terms for that. The auricle may have clasping auricles that come around and are prominent. There may be some short auricles, or they may be completely absent. When it comes to ligules, sometimes they're membranous. They can be hairy or absent. So let's practice this terminology on crabgrass. Crabgrass has a very membranous ligule. So this is the blade. So imagine you're pulling the blade down to show the back of the collar, and what pops up is this ligule here. So you can see it's like a membrane. You can tell this is also large crabgrass because we've got a lot of hairs in that particular region. Here's a side view of the crabgrass ligule. And it's right here at that junction between the blade and the sheath. Crabgrass does not have an auricle, so there are no projections on the front of the collar. So let's compare with barnyard grass. Barnyard grass superficially looks a lot like crabgrass. When you're mowing it, you'll find that the tillers will lie flat on the ground, which makes it look a little bit like crabgrass, but it tends to be more vigorous and there tends to be more of this purple coloration. Now, to be sure, you could examine the collar region. Barnyard grass on the back of that collar doesn't have a ligule. So you'll see that the collar is very plain. When barnyard grass sets seed, it has a very different appearance. You'll notice that the seeds almost look grain-like in appearance and are on these branches. So it's got a panicle with these kind of robust seeds on it. So let's compare this to quackgrass. So quackgrass has an auricle that's really prominent. As we advance the slide, look at those projections on the front side of the collar. So quackgrass is going to have this little appendage that goes around the front of the collar and sticks out. That's a good way to tell if you've got quackgrass and not crabgrass. You also want to look at the root system. Quackgrass is notorious for having deep and long rhizomes. So its root system extends under the surface and then just spreads, so you can't just pull this out easily. If you pull out the rhizomes, you'll notice it's kind of pearly white in color. And then here's the seed head for quackgrass. It's just got a single spike on it. Isn't that helpful?
What was the prior picture with the grain heads on it?
So you want me to go back to the barnyard grass. So I'll go back to the barnyard grass seed head.
Okay.
So that's barnyard with the panicles. And then let's compare that to quackgrass with the single spikes. So just a single spike. Now to help you, I've got a little table to help you differentiate between crabgrass and quackgrass. One thing we haven't talked about is the life cycle. Crabgrass is an annual. It germinates from seed each year, and then it dies with a hard freeze. Quackgrass is more problematic. It's a perennial, and it'll come back year after year, and in fact, you might be noticing your quackgrass already in your yard. Crabgrass is a warm season grass that capitalizes on warm temperatures. Quackgrass tends to grow better in the spring and the fall, just like our Kentucky bluegrass. As we're comparing the identification characteristics, crabgrass doesn't have the auricles on the front of the collar, but it's got the membranous ligule on the back side of the collar. Quackgrass has the clasping auricles. It has a small ligule, but not very prominent. It's not going to be like crabgrass. As far as the growth habit, crabgrass, the tillers are going to lie flat on the ground. Quackgrass is going to have an upright habit. And then look at the root system. With crabgrass, it has a shallow branching root system. It doesn't have rhizomes. So particularly when it's in the young stage, it's fairly easy to pull out and you can get the root system. But over time, it will produce tillers or offshoots, and some of those tillers may also put down roots. So it then gets harder to pull out as the season progresses, but it doesn't have those long rhizomes like quackgrass does. So impossible to pull out quackgrass. So how would we manage quackgrass? So before we go into crabgrass, how would we manage that perennial weed quackgrass? Now it's hard or next to impossible to remove quackgrass from an existing lawn. We don't have herbicides that are selective that can take the quackgrass out of your lawn and leave the desirable Kentucky bluegrass or fine fescue. So this is something everybody would love to see is a selective herbicide. Unfortunately, we don't have that. When it comes to quackgrass, we have fewer options. First thing is we don't want to till it up. When you've got rhizomes, if you till it up, each piece that's tilled up will then send up its own shoots, and that's going to make the problem worse. If you've got a really serious quackgrass patch in your lawn, the best thing you can do, and if it's bothering you, is to just kill that section of your lawn, use a non-selective herbicide like glyphosate, take it out, and then start over. But for most people, we live with it because quackgrass is kind of a fact of life for us. But what you can do in that situation is to try and grow as vigorous a lawn and as dense a lawn as possible so the quackgrass isn't as prominent and won't spread. So the rest of the presentation will be on crabgrass management. The first thing is developing a really healthy lawn. So we'll look at cultural practices, including having the right turf grass mix. We'll talk about mowing height and frequency, a proper irrigation regimen, and fertilizer before we get into the herbicides. So first of all, when it comes to turf grass, if you're finding that your turf grass is not doing well because you've got a shady situation, you may want to, in fact, you may want to transition to a different species. Now, Kentucky bluegrass doesn't do well in a shady lawn situation. So in that situation, you may want to think about transitioning to a different turf grass mix, such as fine fescues, which do really well in shady situations. Secondly, you want to think about using a seed mix rather than just straight Kentucky bluegrass. So we see mixes out there where you're kind of hedging your bets a little bit. So say, for example, you've got a mix that's got Kentucky bluegrass, which will do well in the sunny areas, and then would have creeping red fescue, which would do better in a shady environment. And then there's a little smattering of perennial ryegrass. Or you could transition to fine fescues. You're going to be seeing, in the next decade that we're going to not be advocating Kentucky bluegrass as much. Kentucky bluegrass is really high maintenance and requires a lot of irrigation. So a lot of work is being done, a lot of research on fine fescues. Because if you have the right mix of fescue, they'll grow well in sun and shade, but they'll also be drought tolerant. So you're going to be seeing, various cultivars of fine fescues and various mixes being released over the next decade, which will actually do better than Kentucky bluegrass. So that's turf grass selection, optimizing your turf grass selection. Another thing to think of is how you mow the lawn. There really is a science to mowing, and unfortunately, a lot of people are not educated on this. So have you driven around town and noticed people are mowing too short? I mean, it looks awful. Some people are mowing at like an inch, inch and a half, and they're really harming their lawn. So I'll tell you, this is a picture that I took, and this is my neighbor's lawn. No, don't worry. My husband's like, don't talk to the neighbors about this. I would never do that. They're really nice people. Instead, they were a young family, and I'm sure this was.
Sometimes does show these things.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So I didn't talk to my neighbors, but I decided that, we'll role model the right way to mow the lawn. So you can see that in our own lawn, we mow at a taller height, and as a result, our lawn is healthier. I'm not going to say our lawn is weed-free. It isn't. So we purchased this particular house with this existing lawn, and it's not the best blend of grasses necessarily, and you might even see a dandelion or two. So there's definitely a dandelion there. But you can see there's a big difference between a lawn that's grown at a taller height and one that is scalped. So we've got an epidemic of scalped lawns. So we're trying to advocate a mowing height somewhere between 2.5 and 3.5 inches for Kentucky bluegrass and the fine fescues. As you are starting to mow early in the season, we would say a little on the shorter side, maybe start off at 2.5 inches, and that'll take care of some of the dead material and some of the brown vegetation. But as you're getting into the prime growing season, raise that mower deck to 3 inches, 3.5 inches, and you'll be surprised how much healthier your lawn is. So I challenge you all to do that. The easy way to measure this, just park your lawnmower in your garage on a level surface, get out a ruler and measure from your driveway up to the bottom of that mower blade. And you want to be in that 3 to 3.5 inch range. I'd say the standard lawnmower is going to be, at its tallest height, is going to be 3.25 inches. But I've even seen individuals that will buy bigger wheels for their lawnmower to get that mower deck up even a little bit more. If you're one of the few that's growing a turf-type tall fescue, you can go even higher because that's a more robust grass. You can go up to 4 inches, and that will do very well. So why? Why do we mow high? If you've got taller grass, you're shading out some of the weed seeds. Some of the weed seeds benefit from getting a lot of light during the germination process. But if you're growing taller, it's shading the soil, you'll get fewer weed seeds germinating. Taller grass is more heat and drought tolerant. It's also going to tolerate more grub damage, and overall it's just going to be lower maintenance and healthier. Conversely, if we're growing our lawns shorter and mowing shorter, that reduces the vigor of the individual grass plants. There's just less leaf material, it's less able to conduct photosynthesis. You're going to have a shorter root system, and it's overall going to be higher maintenance. So if nothing else, remember this, the longer the leaf blade, the deeper the root system. And that's really good to know, particularly if we're in a drought. We want to have a robust, deep root system that can mine the soil for water. So this is very important to keep in mind, particularly if we enter into a drought. I know vast areas of the state are now in drought. I don't think Bismarck is at this point in time. You're in drought? Okay, okay. I know you've gotten more rain than we've gotten in Fargo and such, but we want to be considering this as we go forward. So to maximize the root system, you want to have a longer turf blade. And then also how much to remove at one time. We don't want to remove more than 1/3 the height of the grass blade at any one time. I certainly do understand that some of you may go on vacation and may be gone for 10 days, and then yes, you're going to be removing more than 1/3 of your grass blade. But for the rest of the season, if you could mow often enough that you're only removing 1/3 of the grass blade at a time, that's healthier for the lawn than, chopping it in half. Also think about proper irrigation practices. We don't have to water our lawns every 2 days. I see a lot of people doing that in Fargo. We've got a watering restriction where we can only water on even days or odd days. I don't know if that's true here in Bismarck, but as a result, people are watering every other day. But that's really not necessary, particularly if we're getting rainfall. But even if we're not getting consistent rainfall, it's better to water deeply and infrequently. So if you can put down 1 inch of water per week in one watering, or you can split it up into 2 waterings, that's better than watering every other day. If you're putting more water down at one time, it's going to go down deeper into the root system and be available to the plant. So if you can water once a week as opposed to 3 times a week, that is better. The grass needs somewhere between 1 inch and 1.5 inches of water per week to remain green. And this also promotes deep rooting. What about fertilizer applications? Fertilizer is necessary to increase the density of the lawn, and that also helps make the lawn more vigorous. So NDSU recommends fertilizing around the summer holidays. Now, this doesn't mean you have to put down your beer and do it right on the summer holidays, but this is an approximation. This is a little device to help you remember when to actually water, or when to fertilize. So sometime in late May, around Memorial Day. The most important of these 3 summer holidays is around Labor Day. That's important to help the lawn recuperate after a stressful dry summer. If you're not irrigating your lawn, then I would forego the summer application. We don't want to be putting down nitrogen when the lawn is in fact drought stressed or dormant. So I would skip the summer application if you're not consistently irrigating the lawn or if you're not receiving good rainfall.
I have a quick question.
Question, yes.
So if you're trying to prevent crabgrass from coming, you want to do that earlier?
So we're going to get to crabgrass.
Okay.
So we're going to get to crabgrass here in a minute. So that's That's as we transition to herbicides. So let's talk about herbicides. So with our herbicides, so this is assuming that we are growing our lawn the right way. We're taking into account all those cultural considerations that can be used in combination with our herbicides to minimize the appearance of crabgrass in our lawns. So we're going to be talking both about pre-emergence herbicides and post-emergence herbicides. So with our pre-emergence herbicides, these are herbicides we apply before the seed germinates. So I'm talking, late April, early May. And what this does is it forms kind of a barrier on the soil surface. When the crabgrass seed germinates, it puts out a little root. We call that a radical. So it puts out that little root, and when it comes in contact with the pre-emergence herbicide barrier that's on the soil, it kills that seedling, so even before we see it. Post-emergence is something we use after, it has germinated and kind of gotten out of control. So with our pre-emergence herbicides, that's the most cost-effective and less likely to injure the turf, and it's less labor-intensive because you can do it once in the spring and be done with it. For consumer purposes, most of the products are granular, but I believe there's some liquid formulations out there. The thing to think about is timing. Timing is critical. You want to be applying this like a week to 10 days before the soil temperature reaches an average of 55 degrees at the 4-inch depth. You can use a digital soil thermometer, or you can just use a regular thermometer that has a probe that will go into the soil to measure the temperature, in that 2 to 4 inch depth range. Or if you don't have a thermometer, you can certainly go to NDON. This is our North Dakota Agricultural Weather Network through NDSU, and they will show you the average soil temperature in your area. There are two numbers on this particular figure. The first number is the soil temperature for bare soil. So it's on the surface of the soil. The second number is going to be at the 4-inch level. So you can see that we're starting to inch up to 50. And actually let's see here. This was taken on April 24th, which is a couple days ago. And you can see that we're inching up into that temperature range. So we can start thinking about putting down crabgrass pre-emergence, or some of you may know it as a crabgrass preventer. The effectiveness of our pre-emergence herbicides influenced by the composition of our grass and the age of our turf. I'm going to specifically break up my recommendations into established turf and if you're trying to seed a new lawn this spring. You would use different products because of different considerations. You always want to read the label and look at the application rate. But remember, read the label carefully as to what's required, because the label is the law. We have to follow the pesticide label and read, what, where, when, and how. So let's get to the various pre-emergence herbicides that are out there for established lawns. And these are pre-emergence herbicides that you can put down in spring. I'll focus on pendimethalin and dithiopyr. So the first two that we have here, I've got the active ingredient in the left column. The middle column are just some common brand names that are out there. I'm not recommending one brand name over another. I haven't done comparisons. And then I've got comments in the right-hand column. So with respect to pendimethalin and prodiamine, these are active ingredients that would be listed on the label with a certain percentage, and these are traditional pre-emergence herbicides. They only help prevent seedling emergence. They will not control escapes. So once that seed has germinated, these products are going to be useless. I have listed dithiopyr here. So dithiopyr on the bottom is becoming more common in big box stores out there and at garden centers. So dithiopyr is nice. It's not just a pre-emergence, but it also has some activity at the seedling stage. So say, for example, your daughter graduated from high school and you've been so busy remodeling your garage so your wife could have that party for your daughter, and you missed the window. Okay, this may have happened to me last year. You put down dithiopyr. Because I know life happens, right? So life happens. So if you've kind of missed that window for the pre-emergence, you can put down dithiopyr, and that will provide some control at the crabgrass seedling stage prior to the point where it's tillering or sending off those offshoots. With our pre-emergence herbicides, you water in to activate it. So check the label, and always follow those directions, but we do want to water in those granules so it dissolves and forms that barrier on the soil. So you can either irrigate it or you can put it on right before a rainstorm comes. It'll dissolve and form that barrier.
Is that the dry or the wet?
That's for the dry granules. I just wanted to show you some selected dithiopyr products. Now, you've all seen the pendimethalin products out there. A lot of the Scott's products are pendimethalin. I'm not recommending one or the other, but I just wanted to show you there are some dithiopyr products that are on the market. We've got Menard's Premium Crabgrass Preventer. But just to make sure, read that label, look at the active ingredients. If you want dithiopyr instead of pendimethalin, you got to read that label. But these are 3 that are sold in North Dakota. I checked the North Dakota Department of Agriculture website. Department of Ag registers pesticides, and this gives us a list of the pesticides, and in this case, herbicides that have been labeled and are approved for North Dakota. Here are a couple other products: Greenview Crabgrass Control and Preen Lawn Crabgrass Control. So be careful with preen. There's so many different preen products on the market. You got to read that label to know what you're getting. We're going to shift gears from an established lawn, and now this is for those of you that want to seed a new lawn and maybe doing so this spring. You should not be combining that with a standard crabgrass product. And that's because our pre-emergence herbicides, if you put that down right now and you're trying to seed a new Kentucky bluegrass lawn, you're going to prevent the Kentucky bluegrass seed from germinating. That will work adversely to your desirable turfgrass seed. So instead, you want a different chemistry. You would look for products either containing Siduron or 2%. That's what we used to recommend. That's being phased out. The newer products have mesotrione in them, and they'll control crabgrass for up to 4 weeks. And then after your new lawn is established, you can certainly put other products on. So you want to apply mesotrione right at seedling or prior to seedling. You don't want to wait. If, in fact, your Kentucky bluegrass has germinated and you put down mesotrione, it can damage it. You'll notice that your turfgrass will actually bleach white. So you want to make sure that you read the label very carefully and you put this on either at the time that you seed or prior to seedling. There are a couple products that are on the market that contain mesotrione, but one thing you would notice is that it says built for seeding. So if you're looking for something that's got a crabgrass pre-emergent and you are seeding a new lawn this spring, look for one that says built for seeding and contains mesotrione. A couple other products that are on the market. All right, so you had a busy spring and you didn't get to put down either dithiopyr or pendimethalin. So what do? We've got post-emergence herbicides. They're more effective when the crabgrass seedlings are smaller, but there's some that will have effectiveness in the tillering stage. And I'll show you tillers in the middle in a minute. Unfortunately, these aren't as effective as putting down a pre-emergent. You may actually need to put down the post-emergence more than once. You may need multiple applications, and there is a possibility that these post-emergence herbicides can injure your turf grasses if you're not being careful. So I mentioned tillers. So here we've got a crabgrass. I've got crabgrass, and you can see we've got 3 offshoots here. These are the tillers. And that'll become important here in a minute. So here's a list of those post-emergence herbicides with the active ingredient on the left, some common brand names in the middle, and then an explanation on the right. So I've got dithiopyr here again in the post-emergence herbicides because it has some effect at the seedling stage, but it will not have effect. It will not control crabgrass once it has sent out the tillers or offshoots. Once you've reached tillering, you would use products with either phenoxyprop or quinclorac in them, so that can provide some control after tillering. But still, as we get later into the season, they're less effective. I would say once we get past, middle of July, I think we're done for the season. It's just not going to control a real vigorous established crabgrass plant. So this would be, when we're still at a young tillering stage. So phenoxyprop, a common brand name is Acclaim Extra, and for quinclorac, lots of different options out there. Drive, Ortho Weed Begone for crabgrass. And you'll notice with quinclorac, which is the most common post-emergence out there, there's a weird window where it's less effective. So it's less effective when it's at the 2 or 3 tillering stage. It's more effective before then or after that. So just a little weird cutout. But what this means is if you're putting quinclorac down, you may need to put down more than 1 application. So a couple common products on the market: Ortho Weed Begone crabgrass control. So this has quinclorac in it along with 2,4-D and dicamba. And then there's Fertilome Weed Out with crabgrass killer, also with quinclorac, 2,4-D and dicamba. As you're putting down these products, you want to make sure you're giving your trees a wide berth, because we don't want to be putting down too many of these herbicides close to the trees. It may have a detrimental effect on the trees. It may leach into the soil and be taken up by the root system. So we do want to give our trees a wide berth with these post-emergence, particularly if they've got dicamba in them. So what I like to do is I would never put down a post-emergence on every square foot of lawn. Instead, I would be putting this down or spraying in areas where it's worse, so spot spraying. And then you're using less chemical. So when it comes to trees, spot spraying and staying a little bit away from the trees is helpful. All right, as crabgrass grows, as we get into August and September, the post-emergence herbicides are not going to be effective. There's more of a risk of turfgrass injury. At that point, we do give up for the season, and that's okay. It's okay to give up for the season, and instead we focus on next year. One nice thing about crabgrass is it's an annual. Mother Nature will get it, particularly here in North Dakota. So when we get that hard freeze in fall, it will kill the crabgrass plant, and then we can start over next year paying more attention to pre-emergence herbicides.
Where does that crabgrass come from? It's only a couple spots in a lawn. Is that from birds, or how does that come?
So how does crabgrass come from? I mean, some of the seeds can definitely blow in the wind and such. It can also build up for long periods of time. So it may have come from 2, 3, 4 years ago, where it's built up a seed bank. So you don't remember that your crabgrass, you may have had some crabgrass patches that went to seed, but that seed could be in the soil for years before it germinates too. So there are different ways.
Sod that was brought in.
Oh, sod that was brought in. I mean, it could be in the sod, but definitely we have seed rain, they call it. We've got a lot of wind in North Dakota. It's amazing how far these little seeds can blow. So lots of different ways. So in conclusion, the most effective crabgrass control is achieved through use of proper cultural practices in combination with chemical weed control strategies. But no matter what product you use, always read the label very carefully as to your application rate, how much, and take in mind safety precautions. So I'll take some questions at this point. Yes?
How long is pre-emergence control viable? And if you put it on 1 week?
So how long is the control? I'm sorry, which product? Are you talking like prodiamine or are you talking pendimethalin?
Either one, but if you put it on too early, does it stay there and it retains its viability for a month? Or?
So the question is, if you put down the pre-emergence herbicide, will you get season-long control? And for the most part, yes, as long as you're putting it down correctly and not having skips and such in your yard. So pendimethalin is rated for season-long control. If we had a longer season, then we would need to apply. Prodiamine, I believe, has an 8 to 9 month. It's an 8 to 9 month product. I've heard of some people actually putting that down in fall and having it be effective in spring of the next year. Our turf grass professors at NDSU, they say that these products have season-long control for us. I would rate prodiamine as longer than pendimethalin, though. So great question. Any other questions? Yes, Connie?
Esther, you mentioned grubs. Any advice there? They seem to be periodically fantastic.
All right, so questions on grubs. Any advice there? I think that's a whole nother, that's probably a good 10-minute talk. So Connie, I can actually email you with some advice on that. That's a whole different situation. It depends on which grubs are at play there. So we've got more than one grub, but I'll send you some advice on that. So, yes?
I noticed on your pictured products here on your page 7, some of these are listed as crabgrass preventers.
Yes.
Some are listed as crabgrass controllers. And other ones are built for seeding.
Here, let me go back
What's going
to, so you're asking me about the labeling. Was it here?
Yeah.
So you're asking me on the labeling, so it's called on here crabgrass preventer. So that's industry terminology. I'm using more scientific terminology. So weed scientists refer to these products as pre-emergence herbicides. So we use that as a broad category. So great question. So I know that most consumers know these products as crabgrass preventers. And that's certainly fine to use, but in academia we call these pre-emergence herbicides. So just a little difference in terminology. And here it says crabgrass control. You know, once again, this is what they labeled the product. And they apparently believe that this is going to reach the consumer. So consumers like to talk about control. In academia, we know that you can't totally control everything, so we never use the word control, we use the word management. So just little differences in terminology. Great question. Yes?
Now your chart goes to the last thing on there, and it's killing your lawn, which is where we are. We're going to have to kill it because it's not going away with even localized Roundup application. It'll die and it comes back. They ought to call it Lazarus grass.
Are you talking quackgrass? So,
Quackgrass, yeah.
all right, so I want to preserve this for the recording. So this couple is mentioning they're having problems with quackgrass and that we should call it Lazarus grass, which I love, absolutely love, because it's coming back after putting down glyphosate once. Now, some people may need to actually put it down 2 or 3 times. So that may help you. If you want to kill the quackgrass, sometimes once is not enough. So you put down the glyphosate to kill your quackgrass. So this is, I'll remind everybody else, this is our non-selective herbicide. We're killing quackgrass, which is a perennial, but we're also killing off the lawn since it's a non-selective herbicide. In that particular situation, the quackgrass may resprout, so you may need to do another application 10 days later, and that might be helpful. But you may also have other weed seedlings that come up. So sometimes glyphosate in a single application may not be enough. We may need to do a second or maybe even a third application if you're finding that it's coming up. So you would do it until it depletes its resources.
All right, so multiple applications can be expected or can't be eliminated.
That's correct. So quackgrass, very, very vigorous, very problematic. I think we should just accept quackgrass as our turf grass and then just be done with it. Then we don't have to worry, right? Sometimes it seems more vigorous than our Kentucky bluegrass. Yes?
And soil temperature this last week was like 42, I think,
Yes?
or 4 inches.
Okay.
So do we have another like week or so that before we can still put the pre-emergent on?
So the comment was that last week NDON was showing a soil temperature of about 42. Now it's come up, a few degrees. Do we have time? Yes. We do have some time here. For crabgrass, it starts to germinate when we get an average temperature of 55 degrees, so we do have some time. So I tell people when we're looking at 50, but once we get an air temperature of 70 degrees, it's amazing how fast that soil temperature heats up. So it's really going to depend on the air temperature as to how fast the soil temperature will heat up. But yeah, we're getting into that time period where we'll be applying it very soon. Yes?
I'm holding off because I'm hoping to get it power raked before
Mm-hmm.
and put that on. Wouldn't it be better to put it on after power raking?
So if you're getting it power raked, I would do the power raking first, and then I would put down your pre-emergent. If your power raking is going to be a lot later, then I would go dithiopyr as opposed to pendimethalin in case you have a few escapes. Also keep in mind that soil temperature for NDON doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have microclimates in your yard. So along your driveway, if you've got a cement driveway, if you've got sidewalk areas, that's going to heat up first because the pavement's going to retain the heat. So you may see that area heating up before the middle of your lawn does. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Esther.
How do you know when you should or you shouldn't power rake?
All right,
What should the lawn look like? You know what, I better power rake.
I'll tell you about power raking and what our turf grass faculty say. So Alan Zook is one of our turf grass faculty. I'm more of a generalist. I don't just specialize in turf. I do a lot of different areas. So I like to defer to Alan on this. He's not a big fan of power raking because he thinks that what it does is it actually damages the lawn at a very early stage, and it also leaves the lawn more susceptible to weed invasion. So he's not a big fan of it. But I understand there are some of you that may have a thatch issue that you're trying to remedy, and that may be part of what's going on. So power raking is a very quick and efficient way to get rid of the thatch. You'll notice that that you are pulling up a lot of that. But there's some people that don't power rake at all, and instead what they do is they core aerate in fall. And core aeration over several years can help that thatch layer break down. And what it does with core aeration, you all know what core aeration is, where it pulls the soil cores out. It allows water and air to permeate into the soil, which, kind of helps with the soil microbes and such. And then over time, it helps break down the thatch layer. So there's some people that do that as opposed to power breaking. But I certainly understand if you think you've got a thatch layer that you may be doing this. What you can do is you can cut into your soil and look at the thatch layer. If your thatch layer is over 1/2 inch, then that's problematic. 1/2 inch is okay. But if we're looking at 3/4 or 1 inch, it's more of a problem. Yes?
Doesn't the thatch layer provide habitat for like bees and other,
All right, so does the thatch provide habitat for the bees? Not necessarily the bees, but I think it kind of helps insulate and provides some protection for some of the soil microbes and such. It's okay to have 1/2 inch. Once it gets to 1 inch, then, or 3/4 of an inch, it's a little detrimental. Now, I could go and just give you a talk on bee lawns too. So, my family would say, don't get her started, don't get her started. Because I'm a big fan also of bee lawns. And in fact, I'm going to be establishing more bee lawns. We've got some on campus that we've established. So I also believe in that. I don't necessarily, I'm not telling everybody you have to have the weed-free lawn. But I'm providing information for those of you that want to have it. But I also do programming where I talk about more sustainable ways of growing lawns too. But great question. Yes?
Is there a benefit of like aerating hayland?
Benefit of aerating hayland? I don't know. I would say call our extension soil scientist, what's his name? We've got a new one, Carlos. I'm sorry?
Or just try it?
Or you could try it.
Yeah.
You could try it. I mean, I don't see how it would hurt. The soil health is a real big trending topic for us. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.